Welcome everybody. We're glad to have you today. Join us for our Heartland update. We welcome all of you alumni and anyone else watching today. Welcome to you. We're glad to have you with us. We're glad today to have this few minutes to just chat with Dr. Edward Smith, who's just returned from recent deployment. And welcome back, Dr.
It's
Edward.
good to be back.
We're glad to have you home safe.
Yes.
And tell us a little about your deployment.
Well, it's very interesting what we're doing. Heartland, we explained the importance of partnership and of networking. And this was a very unique mission, just very quickly for those that may not have been keeping up with Facebook or really understanding. This was a unique opportunity from a deep relationship, both from crisis response ministries, Christian emergency management, and it was an opportunity for me to be able to go down in a collaborative manner. They've never had chaplaincy embedded with a group called Inspiritus. And so right now when I went down, there was no place for deployment teams to stay. You should have seen the disastrous areas where people think it's all in Louisiana. We had power still out in Orange County, Orange City. I was sleeping on the floor of a church at the Lutheran Church, Good Shepherd. Lake Charles is still devastated, literally runs on generators. Hundreds of miles in all directions, shattered neighborhoods, shattered farms. Entire city blocks had just ruins everywhere you looked. It was the usual looking disaster, but it just still strikes you every time you see the magnitude of these storms. So I was able to go down and be boots on the ground, and I communicated with you looking for opportunities, even for you to have come down. And there, fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, it was very limited in the size and scope and what could be done and housing, and there were missions within missions. But what it's doing, Gary, is it's also letting us do proof of concept, how to work with our partners, how that's things that Heartland in the future will be able to be involved in. And chaplaincy, crisis response, responders, tasks that we want to develop, all that unfolded in the time that I was there. I was able to minister to the responder groups. I was able to minister to survivors in the neighborhoods. I was able to carry out missions for Texas VOAD, and of course, we're a member of the Denton County VOAD, and so I was vectoring all these different things in, and then hilariously in the middle of it, if you remember, I spoke as one of the keynote trainers in Galveston at the Jailers Conference. So now I go from sleeping on the floor of a church to a beachfront for 2 days, and I said, man, God has a sense of humor. Gave me R&R with a beachfront view of Galveston, which is now underwater from the other hurricane. Anyway, that's just the way it seemed to go the last several weeks.
Interesting, you talk about these top things, the uniqueness of each disaster.
Yes.
And that's something that we need our alumni to understand, is that no two disasters are exactly alike, and you really have to expect the unexpected. Maybe you're sleeping on the floor one day.
Yes.
Maybe the next day you're in a nice hotel somewhere.
Right.
But housing, and you talk about that as well, is oftentimes we see that housing is a critical issue in any major catastrophic event.
Yes.
And so the collaborative effort is something that we've emphasized through Heartland, and want to continue to emphasize, because I know that our alumni are looking for opportunities. Those that have completed their coursework, we're looking for opportunities for deployment, and whether it be as chaplains or whether we're looking at going forward as responders. And of course, so many areas people can be involved, and one of the things near and dear to my heart, as you know, is our ministry to responders, and you mentioned that because there's a lot of ministry needs in any crisis, any disaster, to the responders themselves as well.
Yes.
So we really appreciate you and all that you do in deployment, not only with Heartland but other agencies that you work with as well, and that's a unique tie for us in these collaborative efforts, because we've emphasized the point that nobody works a disaster by themselves. It takes everybody doing their part. So we look forward to these collaborative efforts with people like Somebody Cares, and
I ran across them,
and we collaborate with them and others, crisis response, and so we look forward to these opportunities. Now we're excited. We've completed, not too far back, our advanced training. We have people now completing their coursework.
Yes.
And they're getting ready to get uniforms, which, by the way, they'll be able to order sometime soon.
Let me just do that.
Oh, great. Glad to be able to do that. They can actually order shirts like these with with the Heartland logo.
Right.
We'll be posting that information on the website.
Fantastic.
So we want everyone just to be sure and keep checking the website. We put new information on there. We'll send out emails and also do these YouTube videos. Now, regarding the chaplaincy and deployment, one of our alumni had a question they'd sent me while you were actually deployed, and I want to, if we could, address our deployment processes and as responder and chaplain and ways so that we know that everybody understands what the requirements are to deploy with Heartland. We realize that requirements are different with different agencies, and we do things the way you and I determined and felt is important that we can do with excellence what we do in putting people on the field.
Well, let me start by saying our standards, our protocols, whatever they are in alignment with most other ministerial organizations that are deploying, in the sense that when they come up to somebody and they see the word chaplain on a shirt, that means in the hearts and minds of either the responders or the survivors or even the state that's coming to talk to you, their requirements are that they're looking at you already assuming you've been licensed, commissioned, ordained by your church or a ministerial organization. They are assuming that you've come under some guidance, some training, so that when that person's talking to you, they think they're talking to a ministerial type. Now, my wife, for example, whether she's in Heartland or Crisis Response Ministry, she's going to carry the title Crisis Responder. They receive 99% of the training. Right now, it would be 100%, meaning crisis responders sitting right next to a chaplain. The overall training means crisis responders just as qualified to go in, but they're going in to do other tasks, support. But my wife will tell you, since she's not ordained, licensed, or commissioned, she doesn't want the pressure of somebody was saying, well, I thought you were a pastor. I thought you were experienced in this type of thing. Just like there's biblical counselors and there's licensed professional counselors, the LPCs, which is another whole discussion. So to be a licensed, ordained, or commissioned under, say, our ministry, just as people observed at our own commissioning ceremony recently, they saw that those people had to go through certain steps. They had to have a covering of their church. They had to have a letter of spiritual recommendation. They had to do certain things, milestones that they had to reach. And they also had been observed for several years doing ministerial work. Some go back 10 years. So there's a pathway that we can put out that people, if they want to be called a chaplain, but one of the key things I do want people to understand, it's like missionary work. It's not just to put chaplain on your shirt. You're going to have to answer questions like, why are you called to be a chaplain? How do you know God is calling you to be a chaplain? Because you can get into different emotional, spiritual conversations with people. Now, overall crisis responders, remember, we're training them in the future of Heartland. They could be standing in a food line.
Yes.
They could be helping remove debris. They could be handing out bottles of water. So they could have people say, can I talk to you a minute? Or they see somebody frustrated and tired. Well, there's where our verbal and psychological first aid training, ministry of presence comes in. Everybody is a minister of presence. So the chaplaincy just simply means it's not a higher or lower, like it's above somebody or superior. It also doesn't mean there's more pride in saying, well, are you higher than me as a chaplain? No, a crisis responder is key. Not everybody in the church is the pastor.
Sure.
So what happens is we're going to differentiate that and what you have to do to meet those requirements. And then the crisis responders, the good news is they're receiving the same training right now as the chaplain. It's just that chaplain's carrying the ministerial covering. And the crisis responder is under the certification training, and that's why they're qualified to be there. But there's going to be so many tasks, and you've talked about this, in missions and things that are going to be occurring. And if you could just see, if people could just see what these Christian organizations are doing on the ground, it really does bring Christ to the crisis. It really brings calm to the storm. So we really want people to understand you're very important as a crisis responder. You're very important as a chaplain. But if you want to pursue that, which Dr. Adams and I have talked about, we have the covering and the way to go forward. And we'll be addressing that even deeper soon.
Exactly. And the importance is that we are a Christian response agency.
Correct.
Not everyone has to be a chaplain.
No.
At all.
No.
To deploy with us.
Right.
There will be people working in food service lines, people working in logistics, people working administrative.
And our prayer teams.
Prayer teams, actually. One of the more important areas that we have, we just need people on the prayer teams.
Yes.
People that man prayer tents.
Yes.
So there are all kind of areas to be involved. And we just want to make sure that everyone understands our protocol for the chaplaincy.
Right.
Because actually the chaplains that were ordained at our advance have been working with you for years.
Exactly.
And so we just facilitated that ordination.
We wanted to share that with
and share that with us, because they actually appreciate Heartland response and have committed to be part of what we're doing as well in collaborative efforts with others. So we want everybody to be sure not to feel pressured that you have to be a chaplain or that you have to be an ordained minister.
Right.
But if you do, we will start with these letters of recommendation from a pastor or spiritual leader that they're submitted to.
Recommending them,
and then we'll just follow each step as it goes. Now, one thing that I would mention is that in deployment with Heartland, we do have requirements to have completed all 3 of the FEMA courses that are free, the IS 100, 200, and the 700 as requirements. And then the 3 trainings that we've had, the basic, intermediate, and advanced. Now, we've got a number of our alumni having had completed those courses, and I know they're excited now. We want to talk about their uniforms. We want to talk about getting their ID.
Getting geared up,
ready to deploy. And we understand that COVID has affected our deployment procedures.
I'm glad you brought that up.
And could you just tell us a little bit how the impact COVID has had on our deployment?
So as you know in class, we went over deploying in a COVID-19 world.
Yes.
And we showed the live examples of deploying the tornadoes down at Lake Livingston. And now I've done another deployment that carried me into Louisiana and into Texas. Everyone is wearing the face mask. Everyone is doing the social distancing as much as possible. And this is something our teams can be doing. They have a person assigned to take the temperatures every morning, temperatures every night. They keep a log book so that if you notice any difference in the temperature changes, and of course people are self-report if they're starting to feel an illness, so we can determine what that difference may be. While that's going on, I will say that the debris teams, the chainsaws, well, they obviously had to take their masks off while they're working, but if anybody approached them, they would put their masks right back on. There was social distancing even when people were sitting in the debriefings and things of that nature. It does not stop the work of the Lord. It doesn't stop the recovery. It just means people are very cognizant to show respect. I've got my personal protection gear on. I'm making sure that nobody's coughing on anybody, but I'm telling you, the church was huge. You should have seen all the churches we were going to, all the Christian organizations that were parked in the parking lots, food being distributed. But again, everybody's wearing masks. They're wearing the gloves if they're dealing with that.
If I may, in the meantime, we're building relationships with local churches.
Absolutely.
So that we can deploy in the future.
Yes.
Because I know you and I have discussed this, and we try to emphasize this too in our trainings, is that we're not only responders, we look at, from my past experience a lot as well, toward the recovery side, which in any major disaster recovery is a very, very important issue.
Yes.
And so we're looking at long-term recovery. So for those of our alumni that would like to deploy, maybe not even on the response side, but would like later to be able to go in the recovery side, there will be opportunities for that as well.
And it's needed. What's already happening, Dr. Adams, is, we had Hurricane Laura struck Louisiana the most, and a little bit of East Texas. As soon as Hurricane Sally began to come into visibility, meaning the cameras and the weather channels or whatever, then everybody started abandoning the areas already impacted. And if you're a victim, you're looking around going, well, last week you cared about me. This week it doesn't look like you do. That's why it's key what you're saying. I always say it's a disaster recovery is not a sprint. It's a marathon. And many of the hurting hearts and the grieving hearts don't even have people there when they really need it. Right now, the typical survivor's dealing on adrenaline. They're on those hyper states that we talked about. It's estimated that 80% of Lake Charles residents haven't returned to Lake Charles yet because they're dealing with no power, roofs that are damaged. There's blue tarps, thousands of them that you can see. So imagine from our viewpoint as Christians. Okay, we might respond initially for that key first 48 hours, 72 hours, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, but where are the Christians that are needed when that spiritual and emotional, when that adrenaline's coming down from them, that amygdala's switching to the new normal? That's exactly what you're talking about.
Yes.
That's where they need to see, like, people are still standing at a feeding unit with barbecue, but there's a prayer tent. Somebody's still letting me call a number so that I have somebody to talk to. Man, the biggest part of recovery is that medium to long-term, and then sometimes like Katrina, it takes 10 to 15 years for people to recover. And we've had some people evacuate for the third and fourth times. So we're seeing the real training necessary for dealing with people in trauma, recovery, grief, loss. And where's Christ in all this? And you know this, we've talked, where's the why questions of God are just pouring out. So this is why Heartland is multifaceted. It's not just going to concentrate on 1, 2, 3. It's going to be through 25, through 30 steps. We've got to build, and that is what we're talking about. We're building a resilient response organization.
And we hope to be able to deploy people in some of these areas for a few years to come.
And that's a ministry outreach. That is a true ministry outreach. And that will take collaborative church partners. And that's the beauty as we're building this network across different regions that you've designed and the different amazing church pastors we already have. And again, thank you to Lifeline for again hosting us here today. One of our first key church partners and trained responders.
Yes, and Relevant Life Church in Louisville also. Actually, as we did in our advance, we did this officially, the memorandum of agreement in concept with Lifeline Church here and with Relevant Life Church.
We got more to come.
And that's exciting. That's our start.
It is.
We've also got churches in Missouri. We've got churches in Michigan. We've got churches in Oklahoma.
And you're building those relationships through Mission Harvest. And I mean, it's coming together.
Yes.
So I just want to reiterate what you've been saying. It is time to get geared up. It's time to get finished on your requirements. Do not think just because you weren't called on this disaster. Folks, remember, we're on the ground floor of the foundation of a new organization with a lot of experience. And so I hate to say this, at one time there were 5 tropical storms, hurricanes falling one after another, tied the record. There's more on the horizon. While this is happening, we're having the crisis of our nation. We're having a multi-trauma nation right now. We've got wildfires. We've got rioting. We have civil unrest. We have attacks on the church. We've got attacks in education. We have attacks on almost any level you can think of. So when you go as a responder, as a chaplain, I want to remind people, you're dealing with multi-crisis on top of that, because people right now, it's opening up through disasters. It looks like it's just to respond to the tree laying on their roof, or it's just to hand them a cup of cold water. No, it's life issues. People are now questioning the quality of life. Coronavirus has really impacted that. People are scared, or people are not believing it. You have a mixture of all that's going on. So it's the more we train, the more we continue to educate, the more we get in these prayer teams, the more we keep leading in the spiritual aspects. It's not just a physical. We're going to see Heartland and other organizations like Heartland and who we collaborate with. And most importantly, the local church is always involved with us wherever we go. And that's what builds the long-term recovery. Joplin, your pastor friend, our brother up there, what he had done, the incredible work.
Absolutely.
He led in Joplin's recovery from that tornado.
Yes, was a key component to, along with many of the other churches. I think there were over 30 churches locally that continued in the recovery efforts.
And that you and I went out of constantly, never met each other on the ground there, but that's how collaborative and beautiful this army of God is.
Absolutely. And this is so important, because we realize even in any form of crisis, Heartland is gearing, and we're in initial stages in a lot of this, but we are gearing ourselves to respond to any form of crisis.
Right.
Whether it's a natural disaster or technological disaster. We know we've got emotional crisis right now in America. We know, as you said, we've got wildfires. We've got people living in major metropolitan areas that are fearful for many different reasons.
Just to walk down the street.
Just violence. So a lot of the things going on in our nation are a form of crisis. And any of those situations are situations that we want to have a ministry of presence and bring Christ into the crisis. Because you know, and we know, and we teach this, that is the answer to crisis. That our Heavenly Father was the first responder.
Yep.
And He hasn't changed. He's the same today as He was then. He responded at the fall of man. He responded through the cross. And He's responding to the needs and heart cries of His people today as well. And we just are honored to be a part of God's response mechanism on the earth. We pray His kingdom come and His will being done on this earth. I believe, and I know you and I do, that our response is part of that. And it's a way to minister not only to disaster victims, but disaster workers. So we're privileged to be part of that. And these are exciting times for a lot of different reasons. But one of the most exciting things to me is that we've got a lot to look forward to as ways we can be involved in doing God's business, kingdom business, and ministry to people in need, people that are hurting. We haven't even touched on what I was talking to you earlier this week about feeding program I'm trying to initiate in Honduras with the children that I understand, Dr. Edward, some of them are just eating mango peelings.
I know, it just breaks your heart.
It breaks your heart. And so we look for ways to be involved in response all around the world. One quick question before we sign off today is, if people have additional questions, we want them to always feel free to email us at info@heartlandresponse.org. And if they send the questions, if they have questions regarding our response or chaplaincy, they certainly are free to ask us those questions, and we'll do our best to address those and respond to those via email, and also do some of these YouTube videos to respond as well.
Yes, absolutely.
So thank you so much for taking your time to deploy for your service. We appreciate that, and we're proud to be part of that and to co-labor with you in the response side. And we look forward through Heartland, through our Compassion Training Institute. Our additional trainings we'll be announcing sometime soon. We'll have other basic and intermediate trainings coming up sometime soon. And there are some, actually, we had about 10 people that were not able to make it to the events that are looking forward to our next events. So we'll be announcing those things in the near future. So in the meantime, we want to say blessings to you. Thank you for taking time to visit with us today through this YouTube media. We're proud of each of you as our alumni. We're honored to co-labor with you in the Nehemiah style, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, sword and trowel. We're looking forward to serving together with you in the kingdom of God as we respond to the crisis that God allows us to participate in. So thank you, Dr. Edward, and we bless in every one of you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
God bless.